Haribo, Nitai Gaura Haribo.
Renai hai toside vyai Priyai hai kishavashacha Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Sacha Vachai Namo Namaha Renai hai toside vyai Priyai hai kishavashacha Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Sacha Vachai Namo Namaha Jai Tulsi Maharani ki Jai. We offer our most respectful obeisances unto all the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord, who just like desired trees, who can fulfill the desires of everyone, and they are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. Vanchakalpa Durvasya Kripasinnive Vaja Patita Nam Pavanibhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha. Okay. Alrighty. It's, where did I leave it? I was just using it. Maybe I put it in my pocket. No. Somewhere. Here it is. Okay. What time is it now? 6:30, 7:30. All right. Jai Hurra, excuse me. Jai Radha Madhava Kunya Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunya Bihari Gopi Janavalabha Yiri Vadodahode Gopi Nana Malabha Yiri Vadodahode Yasudana Vraja Jana Ranja Hunda Yasudana Vraja Jana Ranjana Tera Vanachari Yamuna Tera Vanachari Jairauru Manava Kunnabihari Jairauru Madhova Kunnabihari Gopijana Ballabha Irivarud Havuti Gopijana Ballabha Irivarud Havuti Yasodhanana Braja Janarandahuna Yasodhanana Braja Janarandahuna Yamuna Tera Panachari Yamuna Tera Panachari Jairauru Madhava Kunjaveyate Jairad Madhava Kunjaveyate Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Paravidakacharya All Siddhata Satashi Shimad His Divine Grace Abhaya Charanada Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Anandakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shidwaita Gadadha Shri Vasudeva Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radhakrishna Gopikapadna Shai Mukunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavanam Ki Jai Mathuranam Ki Jai Jagadasami Ki Jai Yumunamai Ki Jai Srimati Tulasi Devi Ki Jai Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bom. All glories the assembled devotees. All glories the assembled devotees. All glories the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pastaya Bhutale Srimad Bhaktivedanta Swami Namani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharni Nivashesha Shanyavadi Paschacha Dejatarni. So reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th Canto, 28th Chapter, Text 4. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Praptam Viksha Rishikesham Loka Pala Saparya Mahatya Pujayitva Tad Darshana Mahotsavaha Praptam Viksha Rishikesham Lokapala Saparya Mahatya Pujayitva Taddarshana Mahotsavaha Praptam Viksha Rishikesham Lokapala Saparya Mahatya Pujayitva Taddarshana Mahotsavaha Praptam Viksha Rishikesham Lokapala Saparya Mahatya Pujayitva Taddarshana Mahotsavaha. Okay. Yatsa Darshana Mahotsavaha Swaha. All right. Praptam arrived. Viksha seen. Rishikesham, Lord Krishna, the controller of the senses. Loka, of that planet. the watery regions. Palaha, the presiding deity Varuna. Suparyaya, with respectful offerings. Mahatya, elaborate. Pujayatva, worshipping. Aha, spoke. Tat, of Lord Krishna. Darshana, from the sight. Maha, great. Utsavaha, jubilant pleasure. So translation, seeing that the Lord Rishikesha had arrived, the demigod Varuna worshipped him with elaborate offerings. Varuna was in a state of great jubilation upon seeing the Lord, and he spoke as follows. So you can repeat. Seeing that the Lord Rishikesha had arrived, the demigod Varuna worshipped him with elaborate offerings. Varuna was in a state of great jubilation. Upon seeing the Lord, and he spoke as follows. So there's no purport to this text, so I'm going to read the next text. Shri Varuna Vacha Ajame Nibrito Deho Dvaivarto Digata Prabho Tvatpada Bhajo Bhagavan Avapu Param Advanaha. Shri Varuna said, now my body has fulfilled its functions. Indeed, now the goal of my life is achieved. O Lord, those who accept your lotus feet, O personality of Godhead, can transcend the path of material existence. And purport by the followers of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Varuna ecstatically exclaims here that since he has now seen the infinitely gorgeous body of Lord Krishna, the trouble of assuming a material body has now been supremely justified. Indeed, the artha, the goal or real value of Varuna's life, has now been achieved. Because Lord Krishna's form is transcendental, those who accept his lotus feet go beyond the boundary of material existence. And thus only the spiritually unaware would presume that the Lord's lotus feet are material. Okay? So, Om Gana Timiranda Shah, Gadanjana Shlakaya Chakshurun Meditam Yena, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So, of course, the purpose of having, this is going to be basic philosophy today, nothing esoteric, I'm sorry. The purpose of having a material body, especially a human body, is to search for the absolute truth. And to make that point, I am going to cite a verse from the 5th canto, 5th chapter, text 1, which is actually a famous verse that Prabhupada would often quote. Nayam deho deha bhajanri loke kashtam kamam arhate vidbhujam ye tapo divyam putraka yena satvam shudyad yasmad brahma shoka tvanantam. So, and actually there's another verse in the 7th canto too, but anyway, let's deal with this verse first. So Lord Rishabhadev, who is an incarnation of Krishna, is speaking to his 100 sons, good grahasta, 100 sons, and he is telling them the purpose of having a human body. Excuse me. He said, Nayam deho bhajam relocate. You've taken this human body. So, kastam kamam arhate vidbhujam ye. You shouldn't do what everybody else is doing. Basically, he says, you shouldn't act like the pigs. So what are the pigs doing? The pigs are eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. And then he says, Tapo divyam putraka yena shudyas yasmad Shudyad Yasmad Brahmashokam Chivanantam, that actually you should use this human body for the purpose for which it is meant, which is to engage in what? Tapasa, austerity. And then there's another verse in the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam at 761, where Prahlad Maharaj is making something very similar about this human form of life, because Prahlad Maharaj is dealing with the objections from his classmates. And his classmates are stating that, Prahlad Maharaj, we're just little kids, we can't take up spiritual life. And famous verse, another famous verse, which Prabhupada would quote very often, Komam acharet pragyo dharmam bhagavatang niha durlabham manasa janma tadat dhruvam artadam. That you've taken this human body with great difficulty, and you should use it for the purpose for which it's meant. So therefore, komaram acharet pragyo. You must take up dharmam bhagavatang niha. You must take up Krishna consciousness from the very beginning of your life. Komaram acharet. Acharet is an imperative word in Sanskrit, which means you must take up. So we are very fortunate. Actually, I just wanted to read some of the purport from that. That's why I took the book out, even though I have the verse memorized. From Lord Rishabhadev's statement here, because Srila Prabhupada corroborates the point I just made, and also the point Lord Rishabhadev made. In this verse, Lord Rishabhadev tells his sons about the importance of human life. The word deha bhak refers to anyone who accepts a material body, but the living entity who is a ward of the human form must act differently from animals. Animals like hogs and dogs enjoy sense gratification by eating stool. After undergoing severe hardships all day, human beings are trying to enjoy themselves at night by eating, drinking, having sex, and sleeping. At the same time, they have to properly defend themselves. However, this is not human civilization. Human life means voluntarily practicing. Here's a word that you're not going to like. Can anyone guess what the word is? No, suffering. I told you weren't going to like it. Anyway, practicing suffering. Practicing suffering for the advancement of spiritual life. Therefore, there is of course suffering in the lives of animals. It's interesting, like you just really read Prabhupada's purport and just get into each word. There is, of course, suffering in the lives of animals and plants, which are suffering due to their past misdeeds. However, human beings should voluntarily accept, here's this other, the same word. Can anyone guess what the word is? Suffering in the form of austerities and penances in order to attain the divine life. After attaining the divine life, one can enjoy happiness eternally. After all, every living entity is trying to enjoy happiness, but as long as one is encaged in the material body, he has to suffer different kinds of misery. A higher sense is present in the human form. We should act according to superior advice in order to attain eternal happiness and go back to Godhead. Let me just see how much more I want to read. See if we can read a little more. It is significant in this verse that the government and the natural guardian, the father, should educate subordinates and raise them to Krishna consciousness. Devoid of Krishna consciousness, every living being suffers in this cycle of birth and death perpetually. To relieve them from this bondage and enable them to become blissful and happy, Bhakti Yoga should be taught. I'm going to end here. I'm not end class, of course, but end my reading right now. So this is very interesting, that if we want to use this human body, and another metaphor that's used often is the human body is a boat, right? Everybody heard of that metaphor before? And what are the winds? Of course, this is a sailboat, obviously. What are the winds? What? Do you know, Mother Pramila? What? Vedic instructions. Vedic instructions. And who's the captain of the boat? The Guru is the captain of the boat. And if one follows the Guru's instructions, then the water, the ocean material existence becomes shrunk to what? If one actually surrenders to Krishna, the ocean of material existence becomes shrunk to the size of a calf's hoof print. So this is actually very important. So let's unpack this thing about, because we were talking here about using the human form of life, because that's what the verse in the Bhagavatam we're reading today, that the human form of life has become successful, or, of course, Varuna, he's in a higher species of life, demigod. He's become successful because he's seen the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So how do we make this life successful, and what do we do with this word suffering? And how do we deal with the spiritual master becoming the captain of the boat, and the boat is actually the human body, and takes us across the ocean of material existence? It's actually quite easy to understand how to deal with that. But, of course, suffering in this particular context doesn't mean that whatever we do, we should make ourselves suffer. I think if you take that out of context, then you will put yourself in a situation like those people some of the people in Catholic history who are engaged in self-flagellation. I think you might have seen that movie, The Da Vinci Code. Anyone seen that movie? Where you had the person just beating himself up. And then one time I went into Ripley's Believe It or Not in New York, and I saw all the different things that the monks used to do. Anyone been there? Nobody's been there. You've been there. Where the monks used to subject themselves to, because just to become detached from the body or something like that. Hair shirts. My mother used to make me wear wool, a hair shirt, when I went to the temple in the morning. It was torture. So anyway, the point is that austerities for austerity's sake, or suffering for suffering's sake, is not going to make you Krishna conscious. And actually that's mentioned in the Bhagavatam in the discussion between King Rahugana and Jadabharta. Jadabharta is making this very interesting statement. Let's see if I remember. Rahuganaita tapasana yati nuchesya nirapanad grahadva nachandasanaiva jalagni suryar panaha mahatpada ujobhishekam. So this very much relates to the spiritual master being the captain of the boat. He says, "My dear King Rahugana," and of course Jadbharat, just to fill you in, is the second incarnation from Bharat Maharaj, who first incarnated as a deer and now is incarnated as Jadbharat, and he acted stupid so nobody would harass him and ask him questions. So he could chant his japa nicely. Sometimes I'm actually tempted to act in the same way. And just say, have a senior moment, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. It's very tempting, I can tell you that, at my age, to do that. So, isn't it, Mother Krishna Priya? So, Jadabharata, he didn't want to engage in ordinary dealings. He just wanted to preach Krishna consciousness. So he said, Rahugana I taught, my dear King Rahugana, tapasa, there's that word again, tapasa, suffering, or austerity, or we may take it. Tapasa nayati. So he says that you're not going to become Krishna conscious or self-realize or realize you're not the body or make spiritual advancement by doing various means. He first mentions yati. Yati means sannyas. We have this misunderstanding in the Krishna consciousness movement that a sannyasi must necessarily be more advanced than someone who is not a sannyasi, isn't it? We think like that. Or sometimes we think if someone takes sannyas, they become effulgent. Last night we were reading the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and King Prataparuja was overwhelmed seeing the effulgence of Lord Chaitanya's devotees chanting the holy name. And he said, I've seen people chant before, but I've never seen such effulgence. And then Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami makes that point, Kali Kalera Dhamma Krishna Nama Sankirtan Krishna Shakti Vanana Hate Hari Vavartana. One actually has to have the Shakti. And then I made reference to Prabhupada decrying or criticizing professional kirtan groups who don't have the Shakti. They're not effulgent. It's really important. So anyway, so people have this understanding like some external ashram or a guru must be necessarily more advanced than, hopefully he is, than his disciples. But anyway, we just look at things externally. It's actually really an interesting phenomena. And of course, that's one of the symptoms of Kali Yuga. The religion is just considered a change of dress. Someone's dressed in a certain way, acting or charismatic in a certain way, they must be necessarily more advanced or in touch with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So anyway, so it's not that a sannyasi is necessarily more advanced. Like Lord Chaitanya says, Kiva Vipra, Kiva Jnasi Shudra Kenanoi, Ye Krishna Tattva Veta Se Guru Hoy. Unfortunately, we in this Kali Yuga, because we're, Manda Samanda Matayo, Manda Bhagya Padruta, and we're also members of the Hare Krishna movement, that we see external things. We think a man is more advanced than a woman. A man is more qualified to be a guru, isn't it, than a woman. It's just like, it's all this bodily stuff. So, getting back to the verse, Ruganai tapasana niyati. You're not going to become Krishna conscious by taking sannyas. I used to think like that. Didn't help. Just increased the false prestige and the Mahaprashadam. Tapasanayat cheja nirvapanad grahadva, nor by becoming, very ritualistic, good grahasta, just crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's and doing all the different pujas and yagyas and everything like that. Grahadva. Chandasanaiva jalagni surya, nor by putting yourself in fire in the middle of the summer, or ice in the middle of the winter. Actually, the people used to do that. The only way is to actually basically take a bath, abhisheka. It's not to be taken literally, that you take a bath from the lotus feet of the pure devotee. Can you imagine that? This is like, I remember in one temple they actually, what did they do? They took the drain from the guru's shower and poured it on themselves. Anyway, so this is a little crazy. So literally by taking shelter of the pure devotee. So in other words, the tapasa, or the suffering, is to accept, as Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, in the principles of surrender, accept everything favorable, reject everything unfavorable. So how do you know what is favorable, and how do you know what is unfavorable? Then you have the directions of the Vedic literatures, the guru, who is guiding you in Krishna consciousness to tell you which austerities are appropriate, which austerities are not appropriate. And it's interesting, right? Right now we're having a discussion about Janmashtami. What's the austerity for eating on Janmashtami? And there's two different opinions. I was with Prabhupada one Janmashtami, And it was in New Vrindavan during what was called the Bhagavad Dharma discourses. And Prabhupada, of course, Prabhupada kept us all up late so we couldn't eat until 3 o'clock in the morning. That was suffering. He made us suffer. But anyway, apart from that, the devotees had prepared a Kadasi breakfast at midnight. And Prabhupada asked them, what'd you prepare? And they prepared Kadasi breakfast, they said to Prabhupada. And Prabhupada said, no, full feasting. So at about 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock, whatever time it was, the devotees had to change their whole cooking procedure, find out some grains and cook all sorts of opulent food. Now, I'm not advocating to not do that. I'm not advocating to not follow Ekadasi or grainless on Janmashtami. And then, so Prabhupada had us eat and I remember it was really enjoyable, sweet rice, halava, pakoras, and everything like that at 3:30 at night, in the morning. So, Prabhupada was the guide. So that was what he prescribed for us. And in other places, Prabhupada insists that it should be an Ekadasi breakfast at midnight. I mean, it's interesting. You have different instructions that Prabhupada gave at different times. So that's like a captain of a ship. The captain of the ship has to see, steer in different ways, like right and left. Obviously, if there's an iceberg and you're in the Titanic, you better be aware of it. So there's requirement of direction from the spiritual master. Of course, one may say, what if the spiritual master is not present? What if the spiritual master has 10,000 disciples? And I can't ask him how to direct me in this particular way. Well, we have the association of other Vaishnavas like that. We need that association. Prabhupada would oftentimes talk about how if there were many sticks together, they couldn't be broken. And if there was one stick, it can be broken very, very easily. So we really need to have that feedback, association. We need to reveal our minds, like we hear Tadati Pratigranati, Guyam Akyati Prichati, in the association of devotees. In this way, we have the guidance and we know what suffering we should accept. Sorry for that word. We know what austerities we should accept. We know what austerities we should reject. And in this way, we can use our human form of life, the body, to properly progress in Krishna consciousness. And when we please Krishna's devotee, then we make progress. Not by the austerities themselves. The austerities themselves do not give us spiritual progress. The suffering itself does not give you spiritual progress. It is the pleasing of the pure devotee and ultimately the pleasing of Krishna that helps one advance in Krishna consciousness and use your human form of life for the purpose for which it's meant. So that's all I wanted to mention today. Any questions or comments about that point? Yes?
In the early days of ISKCON, I especially was part of this. There was a certain preaching that you gotta suffer in order to make advances. And it seems that
Yeah.
we've got to get that out of our heads because we're not engaging in some sort of mechanical yoga process, but we're engaging in bhakti. So that was in the beginning. I actually had a leader of the party who insisted on that. The more suffering you do, the more advanced you do. And that's what they say, suffering.
It,
They'll one time say, if you like your service too much, you won't make advances.
you can make your heart very hard, and it reminds me of the Jain religion, where they actually pluck the hair out, your eyebrows actually, pluck the hair out and engage in suffering. It's just not, it doesn't bring you Krishna's pleasure. You actually have to think of what makes Krishna happy. And the spiritual master guides us to that. And of course we know, what makes Krishna the happiest is if we please his devotee, and what pleases the devotee most is if we spread this Krishna consciousness. Krishna says this in the Gita, of course, that the most dear person is he who teaches this Bhagavad Gita. Never will there be more dear than he who actually teaches Bhagavad Gita. Yes, Mother Irma. Yeah. Yeah, so the joyfulness, Kevalananda Kanda, we're supposed to be joyful. So we really have to be careful about this word of suffering. And it's not suffering if we understand the purpose behind it. Just like I often give this example. Just like a lady who is working in the bank. Some of you may have heard this example before. She's sitting in a little cubicle. And that, to me, that if someone asked me to sit like this for 8 hours a day, I would be seeing a psychiatrist after the second day. So she's sitting in the cubicle, and not only that, she's counting other people's money, which is even worse for me. You count other people's money. But if you notice, inevitably and invariably, she has a picture of her little kids, Petunia and Petuni, in front of her, and she looks at them, and she's happy. Why is she happy? Because she understands the purpose of why she's doing something. That is austerity. I mean, I couldn't get devotees to perform as much austerity as the lady sitting in the cubicle, right? I mean, I've never been able to do it myself. But it's out of love. So when there's love, or like, the typical example Prabhupada gives is the changing the diapers, of the kid. When there's love, it actually becomes like sandalwood pulp. Yuck. For me, if you asked me to do something like that, it would be, I'm joining another religious movement here. This is part of the austerities of the movement. But for the mother, she's doing that out of love. Of course, it's not something that's delectable to her, but at the same time, it's love. So when one develops love for Krishna and love for the spiritual master, it's joyful. No matter what the spiritual master should do. But if it's not pleasing to the spiritual master, if it's just like some physical austerities, torturing the body, what does Krishna say about that if you torture the body? Does anyone know what the Gita says? It's a demon. It's demoniac because the body belongs to Krishna. Like, of course, you have that story about Raghunath Das, Sanatana Goswami, who was going to commit suicide, right? Because, he was thinking that his body was very sinful because he had all these sores and that Lord Chaitanya was embracing him and everything like that. So he was thinking, let me just end this body. And what did Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu say to him? You have to understand this body belongs... First of all, he spoke to Jagannatha Pandit. He says, what do you think about someone who wants to destroy someone else's property? And then he said, your body belongs to me. And so if we have this consciousness, manasa geha, deha geha, yokishmorapi lamtuya, Nanda Kishore, the consciousness that our mind, our body, everything belongs to Krishna, and then we're using it to please Krishna, then it's no longer suffering. It's no longer an austerity. Okay, now we get to see Krishna for the first time today. I was suffering during Mangalarti because I couldn't see Krishna. I'm not that advanced that I can see Krishna in his holy name. Now we get to enjoy. Jai Shri Shri Radhagalokananda ki jai.
Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam
samasitam Buddha sundarangam Nandar Bhagom Vidamaniya Vishesha Shobham
Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami
Govindam Adipurusham Namaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Namaham Bhajami Andani Asa Sakale Priya Priti Manti Vasyanti Panti Kayanti Chiram Jaganti Ananda Chinmaya Sadhu Jala Vigrahasya
Govinda.
Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami
Govindam Adipurusham Namaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Namaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Namaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Namaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Namaham
Okay. Nila Karuna Pura Bapagi Dwijamani Gorahamani Jage Kata Samua Laila Sate Gela Nagaru Raje Da 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 Bajalako Kana kana tai janjero no Primi dalla dalla sadaranga charane no purabase Makudna madava yadava hori Hore na porore Padana pore Vicerida vase Kero rate Divasa shari rasa jay Divasa shari rasa jay Emana turava manavate Hayaki koro baba nakeho Hayaki koro baba nakeho Imina bachile Yeshua suta Charame pori velaje Tita panahoile hasta. Dina kela bole hai vyasta. Tabi keno ebe palazza hoya. Napashare do yara she. Jivana necha janakasar nana jana vida pipada par tapakai nana vida pipada par nata ya korea tana to me takaka panakaje. Jivera kalyanak saranakam Jagateya se maturanam Avijati mira tapana rupe Ritkagane viraje. Krishna Nama Shura Koryapan Judaya Bhakati Vinona Pran Nama Pina Kichuna Iguhara Jotabuva Namaste. Ulila Haruna Urabapake Vijamani Orahamani Jage Vakata Samuha Loyela Sate Kelane Garabaje Samuha Loyela Sate Kelana Garabaje Jayarat Agalokenandurade Jaya Radha Lokenandurade Jaya Radhe 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 Jaya Shri Radhe Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parvacharya also tell us that the Shimad, His Divine Grace, Abhaya Charadara Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Friends say, Kaho Shri Krishna, Chaitanya Prabhu, Nityananda Shidwaita Gadadha, Shivasati Gaur, Bhaktivinoda Gajai, Shri Shri Radhakrishna Gopikapata, Shayam Kunda, Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai, Vrindavanam Ki Jai, Patiradam Ki Jai, Jagannathaswami Ki Jai, Yamunamai Ki Jai, Shrimati Tulasi Devi Ki Jai. Samabheda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bol. All glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is to Shri Guru and Gauranga Shilabhopad Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pasaya Budale Srimad Bhaktivedanta Swami Namani Namaste Saraswati Vignevatation Everybody Pascha. Read the translation. When the rising sun appeared in the east, the jewel of the twice-born Lord Gauranga awakened. Gathering his devotees around him, he set out to preach to the countryside, towns, and villages. Tatai, tatai, sound of the mridanga drums and the cymbals chimed in time. Lord Gaurasundar's shimmering golden features danced and his ankle bells jingled. Mukunda Madhava Yadava Hari chanted the devotees, their mouths filled with the vibrations. Calling out, they preach to those still sleeping. You spend your nights uselessly sleeping and your days decorating your bodies. Although you have achieved a rare human birth, you do not care for this precious gift. Instead, you refrain from serving the darling of Yashoda and slowly fall through your last moments to death. With every rising and setting of the sun, a day passes and is lost. Why then do you remain idle and not serve the Lord of the heart? This life is temporary and full of various miseries. Take shelter of the holy name as your only business. To penetrate the darkness of ignorance and bless everyone's heart, the sweet holy name has risen like a shining sun. Drink deeply the pure nectar of Krishna's holy name, which is his life and soul, Bhakti Vinod. The holy names aside, there is nothing to be had in all the 14 worlds. Bhakti Vinod Thakur Ki Jai. It's good to see Krishna again. That's exhausting, eh? Ram Vijaya Shri Krishna Jai